Now tell us, how much frustration was there among residents who weren't able to leave their building during the earthquake that struck this week?
Yeah, I mean, from what we could see on social media, it seemed to be a mixture of frustration and absolute terror, where people weren't able to leave their buildings. Because when you have an earthquake, you often have aftershocks. Some of the most deadly earthquakes in China's history, many of which have been around that area of China, haven't been from the first quake. They've been from ones that follow it. And the only sensible thing, really, when there's that situation is to be outside when you're in far less risk. So, yeah, the frustration had a basis to it.
How does the response to the earthquake compare to that of past natural disasters, the response from the government?
Yeah, it's really interesting because normally in the past, an earthquake you would assume would take precedence. This would be the first thing on their minds. But the government has this very strict zero COVID policy that you've mentioned, and the officials are in a situation where there's no downside to them overdoing it in terms of COVID policy. So you get these extreme situations where residents are literally nailed inside their compounds, like they were breaking down walls to get out of their buildings. So yeah, this is how the party works.
How much more patience do you think citizens have for these continuing strict COVID lockdowns?
Yeah, it's not just in Chengdu and in Shenzhen, in Guiyang. There's tens of millions of people seriously locked down in China right now. And they are all extremely frustrated because we're getting on to 2.5, nearly 3 years of these situations. And if you're a parent, if you're a kid if you're a parent whose child hasn't been getting the proper schooling for the last few years, you're incredibly frustrated because your focus is on the success of your child, and you've had to live in this weird bubble for the last 2.5 years with no end in sight.
And what are COVID numbers like right now?
Well, there's been a bit of a surge in COVID numbers. So we're talking tens of millions of people locked down. And the estimate is that it will be considerably, shall we say, considerably greater numbers in the coming month or so.
How much longer do you think the restrictions will be in place?
Look, no one really knows. One assumes things will stay strict at least until the Party Congress in October. And after that, you're getting into winter, of course. And then usually, the numbers will go up even further. So there's no real likelihood that things will clear up anytime soon.
The Party Congress that you mentioned, October the 16th, is a very important date, the National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party that happens every 5 years. And at this one, Xi Jinping is expected to secure a third term as leader, historic.
Indeed, and it may not stop at 3 terms. I mean, we could be looking at 4 terms because in the Chinese system, as in the American system, your final term, you're a bit of a lame duck. So it seems likely he could be there for possibly another 10 years, not just another 5 years. But yes, this is, as you say, unprecedented and really changes the equation for China. Everyone's assuming it will go ahead. He's been planning travel after the Congress, so he's obviously feeling pretty confident about how things will pan out. And the media has just been saturated with praise for Xi Jinping. I mean, even something as big as what seemed to be big, the Nancy Pelosi thing in Taiwan, it was page 3 news in the People's Daily. Like, literally, it wasn't registering in the party's brain as anything significant.
Do you think we'll get any hints of the CCP's plans for succession once Xi Jinping's reign is over?
Look, one would assume, unless he's setting himself up to be there until he drops dead, in the actual tradition of Chairman Mao, that he will have to appoint a successor at some point. But it's clear at this point that an entire generation has been passed over. They will not get a turn, essentially. This generation of leaders who are coming through growing up in the Jiang Zemin era are going to miss out entirely. And if he goes on for another 4 terms, you're essentially talking about a 20-year gap there, which is, pretty disappointing for a lot of people who are ambitious within the Communist Party.
Indeed. Graeme, what else is usually discussed at the Congress? Will the government's COVID strategy feature at all?
Look, if it features at all, it will feature in an entirely choreographed sort of way. So the Congress, you really have two events going on. You have the plenum where they sum up what's happened for the last 5 years, and then you have the looking forward aspect of plans for the future, for the next 5 years. But it's all going to be extremely thoroughly choreographed. We will get an idea of China's priorities, but we kind of know those already. Investment in science and technology, specific fields that they want to concentrate on. So we'll hear a lot about that over the next month or so.
Indeed, we will cover it here on the ABC News channel. Graeme Smith, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Yvonne.